Thungela Resources outgoing CEO July Ndlovu says South Africa should be investing more in coal in its energy mix rather than less, adding that it makes little sense that a country with such an abundance of the commodity would overlook it when the country desperately needs such commodities to grow the economy further and create jobs. Ndlovu is set to retire from Thungela after 4 years at the helm. The company was spun out of Anglo American in the middle of 2021. It returned substantial value to shareholders and communities during the 2022-23 coal boom years, partly due to the commodity price increases prompted by the Russia-Ukraine war in early 2022. Nompumelelo Siziba caught up with Ndlovu and started by asking him to reflect on the boom years immediately after Tungala came into existence.
It's one of those things that you look back with the benefit of hindsight. And you always look smart. You always look like, you could foresee something that other people couldn't. And yet the honest truth is we had just as much uncertainty as everybody else. Because if you go back to that time in 2021, the obituary for coal had already been written. In fact, the conventional wisdom at the time was that peak for coal had already happened, that it was in decline, that in fact, if you remember a few days before we listed, there was that famous Botman report which said this company is worthless, it's not going to last the next few months. In fact, that was not an exception. It probably was more the conventional wisdom that we didn't have a future. But we knew something much more fundamental, which is the ground truth. We could see where coal was being used. We could see this continued demand for coal as new power stations are being built in Asia, Southeast Asia. And on that basis, we actually had this zero-order belief, if you like, that people were misreading the future for coal. Everyone actually, with the benefit of hindsight today, will say to you, well, you guys were saved by the Ukraine war. But they forget the rise in coal prices actually started in October 2021, long before the war actually became a thing, which suggests that, in fact, our reading of the fundamentals at the time was actually correct.
So the boom happened, let's say 2022, 2023, and thereafter, obviously, coal prices began to decline. Just tell us about what sort of strategies you put in place when that occurred, because you guys were knocking the lights out in the years, in the lead up to the Ukrainian war, and of course, come 2024, that all changed. The fundamentals changed. So how did you deal with that?
Strategically, we actually had quite a robust thought process, which was one, we had demerged with a short life business. Our first priority was to make sure that we turn that short life business into long business, which is quite resilient through the cycle. And that's why we were able to invest in the new projects very quickly. I mean, most people get surprised that we've been around 4 years, and in 4 years we've been able to build 2 big new mines. We bought another asset in Australia. That tells you that we're preparing ourselves that should things change, we're able to invest, and they did change, and we're able to do that. So that's the first one. The second one was the realization that, in fact, commodities go through this type of cycles. And one of the things that we took a decision as a board was to build a strong balance sheet. And you'd recall that around about 2022-23, we then said we wanted to create a buffer, a cash buffer on a balance sheet that allowed us to be able to go through the downturns should those happen. And I think all those decisions have turned out to be very prudent decisions.
So during the boom time, to what extent were you impeded by the Transnet logistical difficulties that we constantly hear about? I mean, how much did they actually reduce the profitability that you could have had, even though you were very profitable in those years?
I prefer to think about the amount of value that we created for our shareholders. I mean, if you think of our day one market cap of 3 billion and you have returned 22 billion.
21 rand a share.
22 billion over the last 4 years to our shareholders, and be able to give as much value, close to 2 billion to communities and employees in the same period, who are our shareholders. That's a phenomenal achievement in a very short space of time. Of course, the opportunity cost. If Transnet had not happened, we would have delivered so much more value. But really, I don't want to dwell on that. I think what then happened, because of the value that we were not able to deliver, it focused our minds, all of us, Transnet government and us as business, to say we needed to fix this and we have to work together.
Yeah.
And that's what we did.
Yeah. You have to work together. We've heard about various committees and so on and so forth, but are you optimistic that all the work that's been done in the logistics space is going to see Transnet turn around, in reasonable time?
I'm the ultimate optimist. And the reality is, what are our options? We learned some very hard lessons as a country on ESCOM, that we can't wish these problems away. We all have to roll our sleeves and each one of us play our part. And for that reason, because I see my colleagues in industry and in government really coming to the party in terms of just making sure that we take the right decisions and the right actions to turn around the infrastructure challenge that we've got. It could be the liberalization of provision of logistics and of fixing Transnet. What is good about where we are is we've taken the lessons that we got from working together during COVID and during the ESCOM crisis, and we've brought those lessons into fixing Transnet. I actually think as a result of that, we're going to see faster turnaround in logistics than we'd have seen otherwise.
A bigger question, a broader question around SA Inc. We know we've been bedeviled by the problems of inequality, poverty, unemployment, and we know that the mining sector has been trying to do its part, broadly speaking, as the mining sector. How far do you think it's gone in terms of addressing those underlying socioeconomic problems that we have? And at a broader economic level for South Africa, what do you think needs to be happening for us to change the narrative about the country and its socio-economic woes? To what extent do you think something like the national dialogue that is pending is actually going to help to make a difference?
I think all these initiatives are helpful. But let's accept that in a country where we have got youth unemployment as much as we've got in our country, where inequalities are probably unrivaled on the globe. I mean, I suspect there are other countries which have got a higher Gini coefficient than ours, but I don't think that's what our people in 1994 aspired to see. We have not delivered the promise of liberation that I think a lot of our people thought we would deliver. And it's incumbent upon us as today's leaders to be able to recognize that as a challenge at first. But secondly, I think one is to recognize that South Africa is not short of ideas. We don't fail in coming together to talk. I think what we don't do as well as we should is to take these ideas and execute them with conviction and with speed. If you listen to our government, they talk a lot about reforms. And you listen to the things that they want to change. They all sound like the right things to do. What is stopping us from doing it? Our challenge really as a country is really moving from talking to actually doing so that we can make a difference for our people.
Yeah. You've been on record, you've been quite vocal in a context where everyone's talking about green energy, let's develop through green means and so on. You've been on record to say that we actually need to be investing more in coal, and that coal is South Africa and other developing countries' future. Just expand on that in the context that we're in, and also perhaps understanding and accepting that we do need to take care of the extent to which we pollute the earth.
I mean, I'm not a politician, so I can only say what makes business sense. The first thing is, you've got to recognize that as a coal company, I have to speak for the commodity that I produce and put in the market. Secondly, it's also important that I share the ground truth and be able to cast what I see elsewhere in our own context in South Africa. We are a developing economy. We are not a developed economy. Other developing economies such as India, Pakistan, China, Indonesia are saying all energy sources, particularly those energy sources that are affordable and readily available, to be able to take the millions of people in their countries out of energy poverty. It breaks my heart when South Africa doesn't make a choice like that. When it's got such an abundant, readily available resource like coal, to be able to continue to invest so that we can take the millions of our people out of energy poverty. I think that choice is a choice that we have a sovereign right as a developing economy to continue to develop a natural resource that can allow us to be able to do that on an affordable path. Having said that, South Africa is actually in a unique position. And the unique position we find ourselves is that we don't have enough generation capacity. And yet we get caught in this very loud debate about let's shut down the local power stations that we've got before we actually have invested in the renewables. We can do both. My message has always been, this is not a choice of either or. This is not a binary choice. As a country, we should be doing both. We've got to continue to develop the resource that we've got, but at the same time be able to invest in the new technologies that we've got. And if we do that again with conviction, I can see South Africa be able to impact the emissions quite responsibly going forward. But I don't think we should be forced into this polarity that only developed economies can make.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ndlovu.
Thank you so much.
Super.